Hello, this is Lydia, the lifestyle coach, and so excited for our interview today. We have a really amazing speaker and author on, and I'm going to tell you in just a minute just how excited I am for her kind of being this missing link, like this piece that I've really been looking for in the message and the tools that I give you guys to help overcome any habit and to start any new one. And so very, very excited to have a chat with her. We have Gillian Riley on today, and I'm going to introduce her a little bit. Gillian's first book, How to Stop Smoking and Stay Stopped for Good, is widely used in smoking clinics within the National Health Services in the UK. Since 1996, she has delivered a number of training seminars for professionals in the National Health Service on how to help smokers quit. Gillian introduced her Eating Less seminars in London in 1997. Random House UK published her book in 1999, and a second edition in 2005 entitled Eating Less, Say Goodbye to Overeating. And Gillian followed this up with an updated easy read version titled Ditching Diets in 2013. So Gillian has been a guest on television and radio, including the BBC and BBC Radio 2. The BBC documentary Fat Free followed the progress of 5 people wanting to lose weight, one of whom went through an Eating Less seminar with Gillian. So excited to have her on and to have just a really fun discussion with her. So welcome to the show, Gillian Riley. Hello.
Hello, Lydia. Very excited to be here. Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, so happy that you're on. We have a really fun discussion prepared for you guys today. And just as we're kind of bringing Gillian onto the show, and before we really get into the questions, I want to give you guys a little bit of a context for what I was saying about Gillian kind of being the missing link. So with what I do, and really like my audience and a lot of you watching, I talk about, like the title of her book, Ditching Diets, like how, deprivation is not something that we want in our lives. It really fights against overcoming any sort of compulsive or disordered eating, bulimia, binge eating. A lot of my videos are about that. So there's this place in between, right? There's this side where we're getting rid of disordered eating, and we don't want to restrict calories, and we just want to have a normal relationship with food. And then on the other side, there are a lot of messages out there, and you've probably heard this in interviews that I've done with many amazing women, but the focus is just on, hey, like just eat what you want, like no deprivation, and wonderful things happen in that place. But there's this space in between where, okay, well, I'm not eating in a disordered way anymore, but I also am not really sure how to eat because I'm in this place of, well, maybe even feeling hostage to, well, there are cookies. Well, I have to have cookies because I can't deprive myself because then I'll go back into my disordered eating. So what is that in-between space? Principles to be able to eat well, to not feel hostage to just eating things you don't want to or that aren't healthy, that healthy eating place, but not restricting and not dieting. And Gillian her principles, I feel, speak so much to that missing link piece. So I read her book, Ditching Diets. She has a wonderful TED Talk, and I'll do links to all of this in the show notes. But that's really why I wanted to have this conversation with Gillian. She's amazing, first of all, but next, just I feel like this is a space that needs more just conversation. So Gillian, thank you so much for being on. I would love for us to just hear a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about your story, how you got here to doing what you're doing now.
It came, first of all, through helping people to stop smoking. For quite a few years, I stopped smoking myself. I'm from London, but I lived in the United States for almost 18 years. And I stopped smoking and worked with the people who were doing that program for a couple of years, and then set up my own business in London, running a stop smoking program as a sort of one-person business. It was my absolute passion. I completely adored it. And it was just a remarkable, and I felt very grateful to be, to be delivering this material. So along that way, continually, I was being reminded that for a lot of smokers, there is a very strong link between smoking and eating. In fact, for a lot of smokers, the only reason they start smoking in the first place is to stop themselves from eating. You know, like at the end of a meal, a smoker will light a cigarette, and that's the end of the meal. And for many smokers, when they stop smoking, there isn't an end because they're not smoking a cigarette. And so, you know, they might have a dessert where they wouldn't have otherwise had one, or another helping, or they're snacking and picking as they're clearing up the plates, or just snacking into the evening, or just snacks in between meals. So it's very easy, you know, you have a coffee break and a cigarette, and then you stop smoking and you're having a coffee break and, you know, a few cookies maybe or something. Anyway, that additional caloric load certainly contributes to the weight gain that is very commonly associated with stopping smoking. And I think it's, especially with women, and I think especially with younger women, it's very often not acknowledged how important that is, that a lot of women are still smoking precisely because of that. It's the way that they control their weight. And so I was looking more and more at that, and I was also looking at it from a personal standpoint. I'm about 3 dress sizes smaller than I was when I started out this process. And more importantly, to me anyway, I've made major changes in my eating and maintained those changes. I started running what I think of as the eating seminars in '97, and have been developing them since then. I know it's a cliche, but you always learn from your clients. And so I've been learning every time I run a seminar or work one-to-one with somebody, all of these years since '97. And I've also done a lot of research and a lot of sort of training, mostly on the internet, on the subject of neuroscience and nutrition. Very important. I just think it's part of my job description to learn about that. And I have been doing that for that length of time. So getting on for 20 years. And I'm telling, what else? I mean, it's mostly just focusing on this. And I never would have expected that I would have gotten so excited and so interested in the eating side of things. I think mostly for me, I always had in my mind that it was a cosmetic thing. It was an appearance thing, like, do I look good in my clothes? And I think for a lot of people it is, and yet it really, really, really isn't. It's like, that's the bonus, but what it's really is about is health, and probably more significant impact on health with diet than smoking even. I mean, it's very clearly a health issue with smoking, but with eating, health, definitely. And I'm very interested in helping people support their health. That's what I want to do. And they get to lose weight too.
And I think that you make such a great distinction there. And this is something that I absolutely preach of, okay, if you improve your eating, then, if you happen to lose weight, some people lose weight, some people say the same, some people gain weight. Everyone's kind of at a different place with where they were before and how the way they're changing their eating and improving their health is going to impact them physically. But really, these sorts of things like, looking a different way or, being a different size or weight, to really have those be the side effects. Like if they're the focus, if that's ever the focus, it's just not sustainable. And I would actually love to talk with you more about that. So with your approach, Gillian, about, you call it, eating less. I just want to make that distinguishment of like, a lot of you will think, eating less, dieting, restricting. Please don't make those connections, because Gillian's message is very much about not having the deprivation piece of it, which is so important. And we'll talk more about that. But I would love for you to just kind of clarify and parse out a little bit. What is the difference between the principles that you teach and a traditional, okay, I'm going to restrict, I'm going to go on a diet, I'm going to lose some weight? What's the difference? You say ditching diets and eating less. So tell us, how does your approach differ from the traditional diet mentality, if that makes sense?
It's a great question. It's a great question. And it's actually, I wouldn't have been able to answer that 20 years ago. I think that it all has to do with your intention. And there are a number of problems when I mean, obviously, if a person is overweight, I mean, first of all, I'm not interested in helping people get to like a 000, you know, that's not of interest to me. But if a person is overweight and they want to lose weight, that's a fine thing to want to do. There's not a problem with that. I'm not one of those people saying be overweight and be happy with that. I'm not saying that at all. The way that's done is it's best done by upping the stakes in terms of what's being eaten on a regular basis in terms of health. So just thinking in terms of how, either in terms of quantity or quality, or maybe both, how am I not eating in as healthy way as I possibly can? And when people don't make that shift, there are a number of problems. I think the most common has to do with one of the threads behind yo-yo dieting, which is if I'm focused on weight loss, and so every time I, you know, say I'm in a restaurant looking at a menu and I'm saying, shall I have a pizza or shall I have a salad? You know, if I'm on my diet or I'm attending my slimming club or I'm just doing my, you know, I'm losing weight thing. I could be doing this entirely on my own. If I'm in that weight loss phase, you know, and I'm weighing myself every morning and I'm going, yay, this is great. You know, I've lost 2 pounds this week, you know, like that. Then I'm going to choose the salad. But the problem is that once I've lost the weight, I start choosing the pizza because the only reason I chose the salad was to lose weight. And so you've got one of the threads behind yo-yo dieting kind of built in with that motivation. You know, it's sort of like if I'm going to drive somewhere, when I get there, I'm going to stop driving. So if my sights are set on having lost a certain amount of weight or having a smaller waist circumference or being a certain dress size, if that's my priority, then once I've arrived there, I'm going to tend to stop doing whatever it took to get me there. And it's not just pizza and salad. It's all the decisions about all the eating that we're making every day of our lives. You know, in the supermarket, in our kitchens, you know, there's always an equivalent to, shall I have the pizza or shall I have the salad? And so to the extent that people can bring in a different kind of, I mean, mostly health-based, but also psychologically health-based. I mean, things like, you know, is this going to sit well with me? Is this in alignment with my own, you know, intentions and integrity and what I really want to be doing? As well as things like, you know, if I make this decision, am I going to have energy to last throughout the day? Will I have a mental clarity? Will I have a good night's sleep? Because what people are eating can certainly impinge on all those things. So there's like 101 things that aren't weight-based, and they're relevant at any size. They're relevant when a person's heavier, and they're also relevant when a person's lighter. And so they're just as valid as motivation. Am I answering your question?
Absolutely. That is so great. And I think just a couple of things to speak to there that come to mind is this idea of healthy choices, like, you know, maybe a more nutritious salad connected to weight loss, how just non-sustainable that is, you know. And I feel like as a society, things are so clouded because it's like, oh, you need to lose weight to be healthier. So people make healthier choices to lose weight. And then people say, oh, look, this thinner person is healthier. Well, actually, this is a person who has consistently made healthy choices, so they're healthier. And we get so mixed up saying, oh, less weight means more health, when really more healthy choices means more health. Someone could stay the same size, make healthier choices, and still be a healthier person.
Yes.
So
and also people can lose weight and not actually do it in a healthy way. And there is research coming out now that's showing that people can be metabolically, you know, unhealthy and be lighter than somebody perhaps heavier. So the two don't necessarily automatically go hand in hand. But even more importantly, I think, is how it motivates a person. And the whole culture is all focused, as you're saying, on lose weight. And yes, healthier choices means, yes, you lose weight as a bonus, but most the thing is that you're actually prioritizing. The thing is, people are saying, yes, but what I want is to lose weight, and the thing is, you do get that. It's not that you don't get that. This is the way to achieve that, but more importantly, in a way that's sustainable.
Yes. I love that point that you make of like, well, diets work, you lose weight. It won't stay lost. You'll find it again. It's like, it's not really ever truly lost if you're just going to find it again. So really a sustainable approach, which I love your like principle-based approach of just how to eat, how to be healthy. I love what you brought up about, eating in ways like, how does this sit with me? Like, will this sustain me energy-wise throughout the day? I know that just on my own journey, when I was so focused on eating to be as thin as possible, eating to feel good or eating to sustain my energy, they weren't even in the picture.
Yes.
Because the priority was
why would I care about that?
Yeah, why would I care about that? Like, my priority is to eat to be thin. So for instance, now, that I'm fully recovered from binge eating and those sorts of, and bulimia, it's like I find myself making food choices for how I feel. Like a lot of times I'll turn down sugar because it makes me feel tired. Not because I'm so afraid that if I eat some sugar, I'll be, bigger. And I'll make food choices based on like, does it sit with me well environmentally? Like, does this thing that I'm consuming make me feel like I'm being a good human on the planet? Those sorts of things never even occurred to me when the priority number one was, will this help me be as thin as possible? So I think that's a great distinction that you make.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
So
that's one of the conversations I'm having with people, is how to step back on being so focused and even obsessed with weight and weight loss and size and appearance and, fat and, as in storage fat and all that. And getting more interested in health but health as a spectrum, not just, oh, I'm so sick, I need to be hospitalized, but also just, as you're talking about, just a day-to-day well-being, like having a good night's sleep, waking up feeling really bright in the morning and energized in the morning, and having that energy last the whole day. That's something to treasure.
Yeah. And something that will continually motivate you, because you will continue to get up and feel a certain way for the rest of your life. Yeah. But if it's just focused on the size you are, well, once you get there, like you said, poof, like the motivation's gone. Yeah. So one thing that I would love to touch on as well is, I love, like in your TED Talk, you talk about this feeling of deprivation and really making things a choice. So tell us a little bit about how your approach compares to sort of that diet mentality of, not only am I going to eat pizza now that I'm done losing weight, but I'm going to eat so much pizza now because I haven't let myself have pizza for all this time, kind of the psychological, how things get amped up because of the diet mentality. So tell us a little bit about, speak to making things a choice and kind of your approach there.
Well, what I see, and when I ask clients about this, many people, if not everybody, can readily see that they have a rebellious quality in their eating, at least sometimes. And I started out with that word, that sense of rebellion, because of what you were saying about, once you've attained your ideal weight, you are eating all the pizza you can get your hands on, or whatever it is. It might be chocolate cake, it might be, who knows what. But this idea of a rebelliousness, when people fall off the wagon, it's not like, oh dear, I ate something that wasn't on my diet, I better go back to what I was doing before. It's sort of like, oh, I've been let free now. Now I'm going to get it all in while I still can, kind of thing, and compensate. So there's this rebellion going on. Now, what I point out to people is that it's only possible to rebel if there is a restriction to rebel against. So if you've got complete and total freedom, rebellion isn't going to happen. You can't rebel because you've got freedom. Now, the problem with that is that the people I talk to are afraid to recognize their freedom to eat anything they can get their hands on, both in terms of quality and quantity. There's a real fear there. The fear being, if I actually give myself permission, if I really do allow myself and give myself freedom of choice, you know, that's the worst thing in the world, because that means I'm going to eat everything that isn't nailed down, and I'll never stop. And I'm actually going to end up putting on weight and, you know, not having any control over my eating at all. So the only way I can control anything that I eat is by giving myself rules, prohibitions, thinking in terms of restriction. So this is to do with attitude. This is to do with the mindset. And this is what causes initially the deprivation, also an exaggerated kind of obsession with food, a greater sense of craving, a greater compulsion for particularly the forbidden foods. There's a lot of research, of course, conducted on overeating and the relationship with food. And many, many studies have shown that whenever food is forbidden, it is more attractive. So it always scores higher on taste tests, even compared to an identical item as far as the taste is concerned. But people are sort of led to believe it's different. But if there's something that had previously been forbidden, it will always score the highest. So initially, an obsession with food, a strong craving, perhaps irritability, a sense of stress, and feelings of deprivation. And then people go into rebellious overeating. And possibly, you know, the catalyst for that could be, you know, an emotional turmoil, you know, a fight with a partner, a bad day at work, a parking ticket, you know, whatever. And then people make up for lost time, as you say, eating all the pizza they can get their hands on or whatever it is. Neither of those are exhibiting a real sense of choice. It's like I need to restrict myself and give myself rules, prohibitions, and restrictions, or I'm manically overeating. And there is another way. And that is through freedom of choice. And rather than being afraid of it, rather than being afraid of having freedom and permission and a real sense of liberation that comes with that, and learning how to make choices from that liberated space and not that restricted space. And what you get with that is you don't feel deprived. So just to give you an example, I do eat sugar. I might eat sugar like something like once a week. I don't mean religiously, like, oh, it's Sunday today, I get to eat sugar. I don't mean that. I just mean like about on that frequency. That's about as much as I eat sugar. And I don't eat wheat at all because I react to it. That's not what I'm necessarily promoting. I'm just giving you an example. And what I'm telling you about that, the reason I mention this is I don't feel deprived at all. And I don't get rebellious. And I don't have rebellious kind of obsessions and cravings. I'm absolutely okay about it. And I believe, and even if I did have some, that doesn't reawaken a kind of, oh my God, I've got to have even more kind of thing. And I'm just using myself as an example, but obviously I've worked with a lot of people who've got to that space as well. And that's really where you want to be. And that comes, I believe, through a sense of, this is my choice. I'm not being forced, and I'm not forcing myself. It's my freedom of choice to live my life the way I want to live it. And how do I want to be? Do I want to eat large tubs of ice cream every evening? I could do that, but is that really what I want to be doing?
Yeah, I think that's so beautifully put. And that is so aligned with like the message that I'm preaching. It's just do whatever you want, but be empowered that you are choosing. It's not in rebellion. It's not in reaction. It's not to make up for anything. It's not because you feel like you have to. Like, you are in the driver's seat. There's no judgment about the choices that you want to make. It's just, are they the choices that you want to make? So I love that. One thing that came to mind as you were talking about that rebellion, I don't know if, somebody might identify with this, but I just wanted to share a little bit from my own experience is, I know that when I would hear this sort of thing, like, oh, you're eating because, you're overeating or you're overcompensating because you're just being rebellious. Like, I didn't really feel like that was me because I was a rule follower. Like, I'm like, no, like, I really do want this. I really do want to follow the rules. I'm a rule follower. What I didn't understand at the time is just the way that our brains are wired, literally our biology. It's not like I'm a rebellious person, but I am living in a brain and a body that has been evolutionarily designed to, if someone says there is no more ice cream after tomorrow, I will do whatever I need to get ice cream today. It's just the way that we react. So rebellion doesn't mean that you are rebellious. Rebellion just means like, your biology says, like, this is the way that craving works when you feel like you don't have a choice. And
I think also, sorry to interrupt you.
But no, you're good. Yeah.
It has to do with scarcity as well. And I think that's the biological connection is like, if we're going to run, because we come from an era when we needed to be careful. If we're going to run out of food tomorrow, and there isn't going to be any food because there's going to be a famine, then I'd better overeat today. And I think that that's living with us, even though we don't, have any famines. There aren't.
Exactly. We're in an environment, we're biologically designed to prepare for the famine, and we live in a world where there are never any famines. And it's a hard combination. So understanding how it works.
Very hard. Yeah. And not only are there no famines, but we're surrounded by this non-food stuff, which is deliberately manufactured to be very, very attractive, very highly rewarding, high glycemic index, very palatable, very attractive. And also, of course, all the stuff that we would never have all year round, like all the stuff we just expect to have. Any time we go to the supermarket, that was never available. But anyway, I'm digressing.
No, this is great. That's a great point. Like, you don't walk out in nature and find nuggets of stuff that have really high sugar and really high fat. Like, absolutely. Those are rare things in nature. I'm trying to think of very many things at all, but we have so many, engineered things that give you that, fix right at the beginning, that incredible, you can't find in nature taste and texture, and then are designed to drop off very quickly. So you want another one. Like we have foods that are designed to promote overeating. So
all over the place.
Yes. So I think it's wonderful that we're having this conversation, because I really feel like in the world we live in, we need tools to equip us to come from that place of choice, because environmentally, everything is promoting this sort of, overeating, and then we feel like we need to restrict.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing that came to mind is, I love what you're saying is, when you come from a place of choice, there's no sort of restriction. Like, you can't, one thing that I say to my clients is, you can't fall off the wagon because there is no wagon. Like, there's nothing to fall off of. You can't, one thing that is a really common thing that comes up with people that I work with is just, I call it the chatter, the thoughts from that lower reward system that promote you overeating or binge eating or perpetuating those habits, is just this idea of, you know what, I've already blown it today, so I'm just going to eat whatever I can because I've already blown it and I've just got to start over tomorrow. You literally don't set yourself up with a structure to be able to blow it, then it's a moot point, right? So, coming from that place of choice, Gillian, tell us a little bit about, it's a lovely idea, like, oh, just make everything a choice. But I would love for people to have some solid tools and understand some of the principles that you teach of how they can get to that place of choice. So you talk about a few principles in your book. One of the first ones is declaring your freedom of choice. And then you talk a little bit about thinking of the long-term outcomes. Will you tell us a little bit about how do we get to that place of choice?
Well, I think it's going to sound like I'm not answering a question, but what I want to establish first of all is about the cues, Because if you're not interested in eating something, you know, yummy and attractive and sugary or whatever it is, then it doesn't really matter whether you have a choice or not. You know, if you're walking past the Dunkin' Donuts and it just doesn't do anything for you, then choice isn't an issue. It only becomes an issue if you think, oh, donuts, yes, you know, that looks good. And so the question then is where does that come from? And I just wanted to describe a favorite piece of research that I've come across, because I think it hits the nail on the head and it really puts this into perspective. This study was done with a group of rats. I think they had 50 rats, and they fed these rats on plain rat chow pellets, which was a lovely, complete nutritional, you know, meal for the rats. They were given an unlimited amount to eat, and they self-regulated. They weren't putting on weight, they weren't losing weight, they just were very happily eating these pellets. Now what happens in the study is they take the rats every third day and they put them in a different cage, and it's really obvious to the rats that they're somewhere different. There's different flooring under their feet and different material for the bedding. And while they're in this different cage, which is 24 hours, they are given unlimited Oreo cookies to eat. Then they're put back into their regular cage, back to the pellets, and everything returns to normal. Now, that is repeated 7 times. So every third day, rats go into the cookie cage, eat Oreo cookies, and then back to their home cage. And on the 8th day, they go into the cookie cage, but no cookies, only rat chow. So they are left for 24 hours in their cookie cage, but with unlimited rat chow pellets to eat. They overeat the rat chow pellets. They overeat them by a significant amount, only in that circumstance. Now, the learning from this is that they overate their food only because they had an expectation that they were going to have something more, you know, exciting, pleasurable, palatable, higher glycemic index, you know, something more yummy. They had an expectation, because it only happened when they were in that cage that they had been trained to expect that type of food in that cage. They didn't suddenly start overeating their rat pellets because they had blood sugar level control problems, or they suddenly had a fight with their partners, or bad parenting, or dysregulated hormones, or gut microbiome, or nutrient deficiencies or mineral deficiencies. Now, all of these, of course, I hope you're recognizing, are all reasons that are put forward for overeating. And I'm not saying that they don't ever, under any circumstances, have any relevance, but if you understand the importance of expectation, is I think people will be able to check out in their own experience, I have the expectation of running into the donut shop and getting a donut for no other reason than I was walking past it. And also for no other reason, because I did it in the past. So it's my expectation to do so. In that equivalent, I am in the cookie cage in that circumstance. Okay? So the other thing that I want to add to this is the issue of what I call compliance, because we have more sophisticated lives than that group of rats and more sophisticated brains. Well, we like to think so anyway. And so what can happen is that people can superimpose another context over being in the cookie cage. And the context that's superimposed is a different expectation, which is related to, I'm on my diet now, or I'm on my new nutritional protocol, or I've just joined my slimming club, or, you know, some version of that. So yes, I'm walking past the donut shop, but I don't have any desire to go in at all because I'm being good and following some rules. And as you were saying earlier, because I'm a great rule follower, I can't imagine why I would want to go in and get a donut, even though I had done that in the past. It's a sort of placebo effect, and it gives people a real sense that this new diet protocol, a health guru they've been to, the nutritional advice they're getting might be spot on. I'm not questioning that. It might be the best advice in the world. But for many people, there's like a honeymoon phase that they go into where it's all working really well and it all seems relatively easy and straightforward. Like, why would I want to eat any donuts? Sugar is bad for me. I don't want any now. And I'm saying this with a kind of smile on my face because it doesn't last. And that's a kind of built-in problem that people need to know about, because it tends to wear thin after a while. And, a couple of donuts in, you're like, where did that go? That was another, technique I used or protocol I followed or advice that I thought was going to sort it all out. And it didn't quite do that. So I don't know if that's making sense or if that is something that you've seen people perhaps fall into, because I do see that happening with people.
I'm so glad that you bring those things up, Gillian. I love that. In fact, Gillian and I had a conversation earlier when we had talked a little bit about this, and I just loved that she brought this up, because this is something that has kind of been on my radar. I mean, I have had over, 8,000 people that, we've been able to gather data from that, I've coached or helped coach. And there's this sort of thing that happens where it's like people are always chasing the magic. Like the first time that I did this, it just worked. Or like people are always chasing the perfect meal plan or the perfect diet because they kind of got that taste of, well, when I did that perfect meal plan and when I stuck to it perfectly for the first 2 weeks, everything was magic. I just need to find a way to make myself get there again and for it to last for the rest of my life.
Yes.
So
yes.
For this to be kind of explained in this great context of the placebo effect, I love that, because it's like, enjoy the magic, enjoy the honeymoon. But if you want a marriage that's going to last you for the rest of your life, you can't depend on the fluffy, fuzzy feelings that have happened in that first phase.
Great analogy.
Yeah.
If you actually want a relationship that lasts, you need to kind of do some work.
Yes.
Have some conversations.
Yes. And really, I think with things that are lasting, and I think that we would probably both agree with this, feel free to let me know if you don't. I don't want to speak for you. But really, the only way to achieve long-term change is to really rewire your brain. It's to change your prefrontal cortex to make lasting habits where it doesn't matter what kind of cookie cage you're put in. You have a brain that isn't kind of fooled by these things because you've created something new through choice. Would you agree with that, Gillian?
Yes, I would. In fact, I just have come recently across some research about self-criticism, and self-criticism is so often tied to weight. It's the self-criticism is sort of embodied in what I look like and what people think of me, and also comparisons with others, which I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't know, that people are sort of living with that. It's like, am I the slimmest person in the room, or am I not the slimmest? Who's the slimmest, and who's put on weight now? Like that constant comparing oneself with others, that has a brain mechanism that keeps a person from accessing their prefrontal cortex. It's activating a part of the brain much further back in the brain, further back here, and it has been referred to as the default mechanism, as opposed to the prefrontal cortex awareness. And so that I'm coming back to the first thing that we were talking about, and this prioritizing weight, and I'm only going to love myself, if I've lost weight, or I'm only going to accept myself, conditionally on that weight loss. is actually counterproductive in terms of the way that the brain works.
Yes.
And people think they're motivating themselves by telling themselves, calling themselves bad names and, screaming at themselves and giving themselves such a hard time. And in fact, that is undermining their motivation.
I really feel like one of my missions in the world is to kind of debunk these myths, because they're so common, and they're not just common beliefs that people have, but they're actually beliefs that completely sabotage what they're trying to do. So like you said, that self-criticism, people think, well, I mean, I have heard so many people say like, well, I'm just going to wear these tight pair of pants all day to make myself feel really bad because it'll motivate me to do better. And it's the exact opposite, because all you do is feel awful. And then if you're used to turning to food because you feel awful, and then you eat the food and then you feel even worse about the pants. So one thing, that self-criticism, it's a thing that we think is motivation that will sabotage us. Another thing is the rules and restriction. Well, if I can just create, enough, restriction, then it'll be better. And that actually sabotages us. So for people to be aware of these things early on in their lives, so that they can not try so hard to do the things that are actually making things harder for them, which is a hard position to be in, is so great. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, that's the whole thing, is it just gets so easy. People can see how much struggle, how I'm always impressed with how much people struggle, how they try so hard, and they're doing it the wrong way. But I'm always impressed with the kind of the effort and the intention that people put into this. And it doesn't need that much. It needs some intention, some effort, definitely. But it can be in a much more relaxed way.
Yeah. One way that I like to differentiate it is with the clients that I work with. I really say, this is about the effort in practice. We're practicing principles. That's it. It's not about willpower. People think I have to make my willpower last for the rest of my life. No, not at all. It doesn't.
It depends how you define willpower.
True. So the way that I'm thinking of it is just...
People mean it in different ways.
Yes. But the kind that doesn't last, the kind that's like, I'm just going to be...
white knuckling.
The white knuckling.
White knuckling. I'm going to do this if it kills me. And it probably will.
It probably will. And then you'll fall off this wagon.
That isn't very helpful.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of other things that we think are helpful that actually sabotage us, I know that we both talk a lot about the prefrontal cortex. I call it the U brain. That's kind of the language that I use. The chatter brain, that lower system, and the U brain, the prefrontal cortex. As we talk about changing that, I love kind of the example that you give about, a lot of people have this idea that, well, okay, I have a problem with if I go to, this certain place, a party or a movie theater, I'll want popcorn, or, if I'm, at home by myself, then I'll want to do this. So I just will avoid being at home by myself. So this idea of avoiding, I don't think it's a very useful word, but people are familiar with this, like triggers, right? Like your triggers, I'll just avoid them and then I'll do better. Tell us a little bit about how that relates to changing your prefrontal cortex. You talk a little bit about it in your book, about this idea of you can't quite change your brain if you're trying to avoid all this. Does it sound familiar?
I can't remember which book it is now, but one of my books, I point out that usually, as a general principle, avoiding problems doesn't actually sort them out. And I think I use the analogy that if you're in debt and you've got money troubles, and every time a bill arrives, you just, if it's an email, you delete it. And if it's a paper bill through the mailbox, you just throw it away. It's like, that's not going to sort your money problems out. You're just avoiding the problem. So anyway, that's in one of my books. And the thing about, again, it's a weight loss thing, is that people are focused on weight loss. And so they think, I'm just going to do this temporarily. It's like, if every time I go to the movies, I eat popcorn, then while I'm losing weight, I just won't go to any movies. But that's a short-term strategy. I mean, unless you're never going to see a movie again. And then, of course, there's all the other things that you'd need to avoid, like, as you say, spending an evening at home, or, perhaps going to a certain restaurant where they do a particular kind of dessert, and, or, this, that, and the other. And if you're avoiding all those things, especially if you're trying to avoid difficult emotions, like, if you tend to comfort eat when you've had a bad day at work, like, you're not going to be able to avoid that, forever. And so people think, if I just avoid this long enough until I've lost the weight, then when I've lost the weight, everything will be different. I'll be like living in a Disney cartoon from there on in.
Yeah, something magical is going to happen. As soon as the scale says this number, exactly. I'm not going to have cravings. I'm not going to have problems. I'm going to be happy forever.
I will have solved all my problems.
Because all my problems were really
all of my problems, not just my food problems.
Yeah.
And so that avoidance strategy, again, it makes sense in that context of what I want to do is lose weight. I mean, it doesn't really even make sense in that context, because if there's a lot of weight to lose, it could be a really long time while you're avoiding all these things.
Yeah.
But the other thing, of course, as you were pointing out earlier, is the thing about this, coming back to that cookie cage, is it's not just a matter of declaring, well, I'm just not going to eat any cookies or donuts now. I've just decided. That doesn't change the expectation, because the expectation is actually coming from that reward center, the further back part of the brain, lower brain, I think you called it. It's got so many names. So that's where the expectation is coming from. And it isn't negated through a simple declaration, unless you go into that compliance state, in which case it's negated temporarily, but still long term, it's not going to deliver. So there's a particular methodology for connecting that lower brain with the prefrontal cortex. And that can only be done in the circumstances, not by avoiding circumstances. So it's a bit like, I want to learn to swim, but I'm never going to get in any water. It's like, you might have a bit of a problem there,
And you can certainly learn it in theory. I can give you a quiz on swimming facts, but that real skill.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that's a beautiful thing that you're saying. I think, I just want to reiterate it, because it's so important to understand that when you're in that state of compliance, when you're just following orders or when you're just avoiding things, you're not actually changing your brain or your prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
It's in the moment. And I say the same thing. I have clients who are coming from, some principles that I don't teach. I teach kind of the non-therapy approach, but one of the therapy principles is write long, long lists of all of your triggers and just avoid all of them, which can literally be most of your life. I mean, I have women who quit jobs to avoid triggers. I have women who, it's like, there's so much. So the beautiful thing is,
the other thing too is you can create triggers.
Exactly. And that's the thing, if you get rid of your triggers.
There's another trigger I just created.
Exactly. Well, you get rid of all these triggers, but then you're still doing the thing that your brain is perpetuating. You're still overeating or binge eating. Well, now I have to get rid of those things. Your life literally gets smaller and smaller. And I've had this happen in my own life, and it's not fun. And it's a full-time job just to try to avoid your life. So I think it's a beautiful thing to realize the reward in being in the moment instead of avoiding the trigger. I oftentimes coach people, when they say, well, should I just, stay away from all these things? I was like, or you could just live your life, be with the things that you're normally with, and work on using your prefrontal cortex or your U-brain. I have a process called calling out the chatter, which is essentially a way to go from that lower brain to using your higher brain and start changing those prefrontal cortex connections. And you can only do that while you're in the trigger anyway. So go ahead, right?
That's when you're in the water, flailing around, learning how to swim. That's what I tell my clients. Yeah,
exactly. And it may feel scary.
You won't have perfect strokes every time, but you've certainly got much more chance of learning how to swim than if you're standing at the edge of the pool going, "No, I ain't getting in."
Exactly. But I know all about swimming, so I don't really need to get in, right?
Yes.
Nothing like experience. Nothing like experience.
Yeah.
So, and it's a beautiful thing that we get to live our lives and have those experiences and be able to change within them. We don't have to stop our lives. At least this is the message that I preach. Keep going.
not only have our lives, but also have our imperfect, less than, enjoyable lives sometimes. I think it's important to have the miserable bits, and the bits where we're not getting what we want, and feeling perhaps frustrated or ignored or rejected, or all of that. It's not just having my life, perfect, but having my life be actually not, there's a lot that isn't so great about it. And I can still be in control of my eating. That is precious, absolutely precious. To be able to have that, because that is one thing I can do. I don't get to change my boss's behavior or my spouse's behavior. I don't get to change that, but I can absolutely be in control of my response to that, and whether or not I eat in response to that. And that is incredibly empowering when people really get that.
Amen.
Yeah. Amen.
Absolutely. Amen. So thank you so much, Gillian. I have loved this conversation. This has been fantastic. And I mean, of course, we could talk for a long time about lots of things, but in wrapping up, is there anything else that's kind of on, I'm like looking down at my notes in case anyone thought I was like looking at something else. I'm looking at notes. Is there anything else on your mind that you feel wouldn't be complete unless we kind of touched on that kind of as we're wrapping up? Or do you feel a completeness to our conversation?
Just that there really is research now showing that there are things happening in people's brains that are automatic triggers that automatically happen in people's brains. And that can be changed. There is a way to change that. That's really what I want to leave people with. I think that's, and not with surgery or pharmaceuticals, but by thinking differently. And that's you could do a YouTube search for neuroplasticity and find people talking about that. That really is a very real phenomena. And I think that's fair to say that's what you and I are both teaching very, very specifically in terms of dealing with overeating, compulsive eating, binge eating. They're different forms of the same thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I'm so happy to, be connected with you. And I feel like we really are so aligned in that. And I think it's a wonderful thing for people to develop in their lives is do what you want to do. And you can change your habits of thought, which change your brain, which change your thoughts. It's this wonderful virtuous cycle of you can get more and more in the driver's seat of your own life. So thank you, Gillian, for really bringing these principles that have been this missing link for, so many women who are now over their disordered eating. Hallelujah. Yay. Or so much improved on that. But so how do I eat? How do I eat without a diet? That's like a question on the whole world's mind. Well, how do I eat if I don't have a diet? It's so very possible. It's one of the most natural things that our body does. I feel like we just have gotten out of touch of how to find that. And so I love your principles. Thank you so much for being on.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
So you can find more of Gillian Riley at eatingless.com. And she has books that I will put links to in the show notes, so you can find her and her website. And of course, you can always go to lydiawenti.com for your free ebook, How to Stop Binge Eating and Be Successful at Everything Else. You can also go to lydiavideo.com for weekly videos that come out every Monday about the sorts of things that we've talked about today, just changing your prefrontal cortex, being in the driver's seat of your own life, and just eating better and how you want. It doesn't even have to be better. Just if you want to be better, eat better. Eat how you want. So thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you again, Gillian, for being on. And this is Lydia, the Lifestyle Coach, signing off. Mwah.